Hello, travelers. It has been such a long time since I made a large upload for this channel, so I hope you do enjoy Haunted House Escapades. But firstly, I would like to thank Tik Tok creators at Big Sis of Anime and at Mars Mignon. I hope I pronounced your name properly. It sounds very French to me. I had watched I think Mars Mignon's stitch of Big Sis Anime's TikTok, and I just had to write something up. For those who have actually read Haunted House Escapades, you can find it on Wattpad, but otherwise, I hope you enjoy this little audio. Thank you all for joining me today. The spooky season has come out to play. Now with the city decorating itself with pumpkins and candles, creepy crawlies and ghouls. An invite from Edenton's principal mechanic caught many off guard, but ever since the reunion night, they had been fervent to make connections, and in turn, create all the support items required by all who were close to Iida. Still, free invitations to the first fully functional and interactive haunted house was something nobody could ignore, at least for most. But it came with one condition. All that had received an invitation must dress for the occasion. Whoa. You stared up at the attraction in awe, watching the lights flicker from inside the makeshift house, casting shadows of figures that creaked and swayed. The haunted house attraction at the indoor amusement park was a sight to see, having been built by Iida's top mechanic. You wondered what was in store while you stood by the makeshift gate that opened up to a mechanized yet very convincing-looking courtyard, filled with gravestones.
Yeah, I heard this place had wicked scares,
commented Kirishima with a grin, his red hood hanging over his head while his unruly red hair draped from within its canopy. You peered up at the redhead with a smirk, fixing his hood so that his face was open to see from underneath. I still can't believe you dressed as Red Riding Hood. At least one with pants.
You teased. It's kinda like a tradition,
he explained with a wry smile, revealing his teeth playfully.
Ever since Bakugou dressed as a werewolf back at the academy on our first Halloween there. It's been our thing.
Why am I not surprised? You chuckled while you fixed the collar of your shirt and the straps of your trousers that held the large faux axe by its belt. Arriving at the amusement park was a pleasant surprise after spotting and meeting with Kirishima's ragtag friends, who all received an invite to the attraction. His reasoning for his costume was soon self-explanatory after finding Bakugou indeed dressed as a werewolf for the day. You were bewildered that the blonde came dressed in the first place while his arm encircled around his fiancé's shoulders, but you didn't want to question it. So, shall we? You asked, your eyes still drawn towards your axe.
Yeah.
Kirishima's voice trailed off with uncertainty while you still fiddled with the axe, ensuring that it wouldn't swing aimlessly around before you entered the attraction. Your attention was absent, focused more so on your costume from malfunctioning before.
You go first,
suggested Kirishima with a light push, tripping your boots momentarily into the cobblestones that lined the path towards the house. Hey! You exclaimed while you found your feet, turning to Kirishima with a huff. We're in this together!
You're the huntsman,
he exclaimed in protest before he clutched on his hood, swaying coyly with a turn of his feet on his toes.
Aren't you going to protect me?
The bubbling sensation in your throat pushed through your nostrils, chortling a little at his display before clearing your throat with a horrible attempt to keep the laughter at bay. Sometimes you couldn't take Kirishima seriously when he teased boldly. Alright, Mr. Scaredy Cat. Let's go. You coaxed while you reached out for his hand, grabbing his large palms and leading him into the attraction, through the fog and the voices that echoed around the courtyard. Kirishima didn't object, smiling at your back while you entered the front doors.
Aw, you're my hero, Thumper.
He cooed with a tease. You only turned to Raz, sticking your tongue out in jest while you walked deeper into the dark shadows of the house with Kirishima in tow. He followed right after with no resistance against your pull, excited to see what was in store. Arriving at the amusement park came with a few greetings when you found most of Todoroki's friends by the haunted house that you were invited to experience. You expected to meet Iida and his +1 from UA's reunion, but finding Midoriya by the large gates with his fiancée was, in fact, a relief. You weren't one for horror attractions, let alone walking through a haunted house filled with who knew what with no boundaries between yourself and the attraction. As impressive as the set felt with its atmosphere befitting of Halloween, it wasn't a welcoming sight. You clutched onto Todoroki's arm while walking through the attraction, thanks to some coaxing from Iida's mechanic and the creator of such a horror. They gave you one lifeline, directing you to the secret exit out from the attraction if the experience became too much for you to take. Unfortunately, that secret entrance was halfway through, and you both had lost Midoriya and his fiancée some time ago. Well, so far so good, you uttered while your eyes roamed about every dark corner you found, your body hugging tightly into Todoroki now that you had bypassed the foyer of the house and had chosen to roam one of the 3 halls filled with eerie paintings on the walls.
It's an improvement from the experience back at UA's Culture Festival,
hummed Todoroki, his aloof eyes staring at the paintings with not a sign of fright.
There's a lot of attention to detail.
It was only the one time with Class 1C. I don't think any other class made one that topped theirs. Todoroki hummed in acknowledgement of your recollection while he still observed the paintings, staring into their eyes which you surely thought were following the both of you through the dimly lit hallway. His arm linked your waist into his, almost hiding underneath his dark cloak and keeping you close. In the mood light of the halls, you found his costume to befit the scenery with his tall, pointed collars framing his face, and his hair tied messily behind his head. You figured that he was impartial to dressing up as a vampire for the Halloween season, given the few Halloween celebrations back at UA, but it oddly suited his calm and collected demeanor. He smiled while his hand trailed up to your shoulders, squeezing it gently to comfort you from the fear that never left.
The exit isn't too far away,
he reassured.
We can leave when we reach it.
A sudden jolt in your costume's train caught you by surprise, gasping before a squeak escaped your throat. You felt Todoroki's hands brace your shoulders, turning to find your train caught what looked like a pile of bones scattered on the edges of the hall. You felt a shiver run up your spine, while Todoroki released your train, gently coiling it up to hold in his arms. It didn't trail behind too far, but your Ice Royal ensemble was a staple of yours since the academy. It seemed that old habits die hard between Todoroki and yourself.
This is honestly very tame,
continued Todoroki while he handed your train to you, leading you by the arm once more.
This isn't that scary.
You had successfully left the haunted house by the secret exit, relieved to leave the dark confines of the attraction. But that didn't go without a simple explanation to the damages caused by Todoroki.
I had to burn it down,
he dryly explained with no sign of remorse. I tried to stop him. You followed after.
Todoroki!
Reprimanded Iida, having stayed by the exit as a favor after hearing of your reluctance to enter the haunted manor. Leaving the attraction, damp from the emergency sprinklers and smelling of smoke from the fire, wasn't a pleasant way to end the experience. But luckily Todoroki was able to dry off the moisture from the costumes you wore once the both of you were brought out from the dark. It happened so quickly when, out of nowhere, from behind the walls, jumped a large werewolf, its eyes burning brightly red and its fur glowing fluorescently under the lights. It snarled, baring its teeth with its arms held up high and its claws jutting out towards the both of you. You felt Todoroki's body seize next to you until, in a knee-jerk reaction to the jump scare, set the animatronic on fire.
Oh, are you serious?
Cried out a hapless sigh from a very exasperated mechanic. Their eyes filled with disbelief until, like a switch, they became thoughtful of the event.
At least the emergency systems work well isolated. It gives others a chance to experience the manor without any interruptions.
You watched their smile widen with pride, confused that they weren't too upset about the damage, until they read your face with a grin.
I'll be able to swap out Canis Major for her brother without interrupting Midoriya's experience,
they explained. You sighed exasperatedly at the explanation. But at the very least, both Todoroki and yourself survived the manor. Halloween. The best season to be amongst the people in costume without anyone batting an eye. All it took was a few accessories. After a bit of borrowing across the city, you found the pieces you needed to dress up. Well, just two that were perfect for the job. A fox mask complete with ease, and an attachable tail. Walking out in public was a piece of cake, being greeted by Halloween goers who reveled in the festivities, and a few poor souls that you could pickpocket for your amusement or need. A stroll through the streets turned your curious eye towards Fukuoka, where a very familiar head of hair crossed your line of sight, entering into a building. You learnt that it was an amusement park built indoors, entering to follow the man towards a large attraction lit up from the inside out, covered in fog and mist, and built with moving parts, all different kinds. It intrigued you furthermore when Sero met up with his gaggle of friends, all dressed up for the season, about to embark on their adventure into said attraction. Hiding away through the crowd, you immediately shot a ball of light towards one of the many open windows of the mechanized haunted manor, jumping into the large foyer and perching yourself amongst a number of statues that decorated the ceiling. It was nothing different from sneaking into a bank or a museum. But with the doors opening from the front of the lobby, you spotted Sero enter along with a short man dressed comically in a cloak. It was no surprise who that was, having the pleasure of meeting him once before.
Honestly, what are you supposed to be?
Asked Mineta, eyeing Sero's slightly plain-looking outfit.
Kirishima's partner did it better than you. You're one to talk.
He rebutted, eyeing the short cape and the fangs that protruded out from Mineta's mouth.
Chicks dig vampires.
Yeah, well, you look more like a bat.
You tried your very best to hold in your laughter, chuckling deeply in your lungs before you breathed to relax once more. You eyed Sero's costume, finding that you couldn't agree more with Mineta on his observation. However, you noticed a few accessories that stood out, most notably the toy crossbow that hung from Sero's back. In the back of your mind, you wondered what he could be dressed as, scrounging through any recollection on horror-related creatures and characters. A hunter, perhaps? He didn't wear long coats or wore any large-brimmed hats, but he looked very woodsman-like. It was enjoyable to stare at.
Say, did you see the look of them outside?
Asked Mineta, catching your ear.
Maybe a bit rough around the edges, but if Iida isn't tapping that, I might have a chance. Really, man? That's all you're thinking about?
Asked Sero with a sigh, making his way towards 3 doors to choose from. You shook your head disappointingly, not surprised to hear the short man speak about prospective partners, if not hookups, given your experience with him at that reunion. But you couldn't fault him. He did have good taste, and Sero had explained briefly during your impromptu Christmas visit that he wasn't all that bad.
That corset on them was just divine!
Cooed Mineta, his face pulling ever so lewdly. On second thought,
Good luck with that.
Ended Sero, entering one of the doors with Mineta in tow. You smirked before shooting yourself in a beam of light through the crack of the door, before it slammed shut behind the men, engulfing the hall with a flash before you shot into the dark ahead. You couldn't help but smile at the sound of a squeak from Mineta, sliding across the floor before meeting with the skull of a decomposing skeleton by the wall, its eye peering back at you with its naked stare.
Huh.
You uttered, admiring the attention to detail. Whoever made this attraction was an artist, you thought, eyeing the shadows of both men down the hall with an idea you couldn't pass up. With a multitude of light that sparked from your palms, you sent them out with a gentle flick of your wrist, their bright flickers decorating the hallway before they disappeared into the dark.
Ah! What are those?
Pointed out Mineta, the fear prickling up at the back of his spine.
Just some lights.
Nonchalantly replied Sero.
Come on, dude, it's the oldest trick in the book.
His eye turned back into the dark hallway, decrepit and covered in dust and cobwebs, until one ball of light languidly floated towards him, drunkenly wobbling in the air. He stared at it, curious, before it immediately shot away into the dark above, soon followed by a clang and a smash of items falling from the sky. Mainly next to Mineta. Mineta screamed with every item that dropped near him, from plastic vases, broken wooden goods, and the occasional skull, until suddenly something large fell atop his head, its arms draped across his shoulders and its head leaning by his side. He turned to stare into the naked eye of a skeleton still with flesh attached to its bones and matted hair that draped across its face. He cried and screamed while he ran in circles, the skeleton still attached to his shoulders until it finally fell from them, falling in a heap onto the floorboards. Sero couldn't help but watch the spectacle with an outrageous laugh, bowling over with his arms and hands against his chest. The sight almost made him die of laughter.
Is my pain that much entertainment for you?
Cried Mineta, curled in a ball on the floor away from the rotten skeleton that laid by the wall.
Oh, yes,
replied Sero with a grin. A flash of light caught his eye before something light floated before him. A card, the stock very familiar to his eye. While Mineta still laid on the floor, Sero grabbed the card, turning to spot your familiar handwriting.
Trick or treat, Bucky! Let me entertain you.
He sighed exasperatedly, knowing that you were somehow involved. seeing how much bolder you've become in making yourself a part of his waking life. But this was going to be an unforgettable experience. And he loved you for it. It took some convincing to get Bakugou to agree for this invite, after hearing that all his friends had also received one for this haunted house experience. It wasn't more so the invite that perturbed him. It was the condition added on top. Bakugou refused to dress for Halloween and was more than happy to forego participating in something as mundane as an experience. But after a few phone calls from friends and a very convincing argument from Kirishima, he folded. He agreed to dress as a werewolf for the day, his usual go-to according to Kirishima. The aforementioned redhead had already pre-warned you that he was dressing as Red Riding Hood, so as the both of you didn't double up on the costume fiasco. It left you wondering what you could dress up as for the occasion, actually going through an endless black hole of image searching for some inspiration. The day of the invitation came with a meet and greet, finding familiar faces by the large faux gates of the attraction, and a squeal from Iida's mechanic at the sight of you, dressed prim and proper in Victorian steampunk fashion. After an excitable introduction, both Bakugou and yourself entered the courtyard grounds along with Kaminari, who decided to tag along, walking through the large front doors to be met by an impressive-looking foyer.
Sky Pirate?
Questioned Kaminari while he strolled alongside Bakugou and yourself through the lobby, eyeing the 3 doors ahead.
Yeah, I've got nothing.
You admitted.
Plus, it kind of fits my personality.
A scoff answered that statement, finding Bakugou's scowl embedded into his brow while he turned his eye towards each door, contemplating on which one to enter based on the instructions given by that mechanic outside.
You're really against my own reasoning?
You questioned with a skeptical brow, staring up at the wolfed-up man.
You chose a costume that is vague.
He reiterated, making his way towards a door with Kaminari and yourself in tow.
You could be anything you label yourself with the way you're dressed. And besides, fitting your personality? Airhead.
Oh? And what does the big bad wolf think?
You teased, raising your hands above your head in place for ears. Bakugou slowly opened the door, eyeing your teasing gesture before he pulled you in, his hands cradling you in his arms while he edged his fangs closer. He growled under his breath, very befitting of his costume choice, while the door continued to open, revealing a long corridor decorated in a multitude of lights.
How about I sink my fangs into your neck and you can find out?
The offer was abrupt and out of nowhere, staring into Bakugou's almost glowing eyes until a colorful creature jumped from the door. Bakugou's fist swung straight into the face of a toothy clown, covered in dirt and blood, and keeling over from the strength he exuded in that one swing. You stared at the clown, whimpering and holding his face before he crawled back into the dark, most likely disappearing into the walls of the hallway ahead. Bakugou's hands clutched onto your body, pulling you into him tightly while his hands still held out in a fist. The look on his face was curdled with a sneer, but his eyes were wide and, to his dismay, filled with irritation. He soon relaxed, feeling his arms releasing you from his tight grip that almost crushed you if given the chance. A huff escaped his nostrils, turning his eye onto Kaminari, who stared at him smugly at what had transpired.
It's not my fault the clown put his face near my fist.
Excused Bakugou, half reasoning, half threatening.
Kajan, just admit that you were scared and you punched his face by accident.
smoothly suggested Kaminari with that smug smile plastered on his face.
I wasn't scared, Franken dumbass. Devil?
Pointed out Kaminari, pointing at the horns that sat atop his head and showing off the smart formal dress he wore. Bakugou scoffed irritably before he pulled you into the hallway with him, ignoring Kaminari's presence. Leaving the jovial blonde behind, you turned to Bakugou, wrapping your arm around his waist in comfort. He rarely showed any forms of weakness in public, but while with you, alone in this experience of horror, he gripped tighter on your waist in return, hugging you against his chest. At least with his reflexes, you felt you wouldn't gain as many scares as the attraction would offer. You had a good laugh upon arriving at the amusement park, finding that Kirishima and yourself came as the same character. Despite the momentary pout from the redhead, you couldn't help your giggles at how apt the choice was for him to go as such. For you, it felt pretty simple, seeing you already owned a red cloak in the form of your hero outfit. It only needed another set of clothes to make the look, rummaging around for anything plain-looking to make the cloak the centerpiece of the costume. Still, standing by Midoriya's taller figure draped in a white sheet and cloak, made for a sight between the two. Eventually, the both of you entered the attraction, joined by Todoroki and his fiancée, who somewhat complemented their outfits. The foyer seemed the staple. A large introduction to the attraction setting the mood before you all were presented with doors to enter. You all decided to go in together, following each other, in the dark. Until you both lost Todoroki some time ago.
I think we should have turned back.
You suggested while you eyed the brightly colored lights that flickered through the halls and the melodies of fanfare echoing eerily around.
This hallway changed somehow. Weren't there paintings on the walls?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
Uttered Midoriya, his arms shrinking within the white cloak he wore. You retraced your steps back, finding the point of origin not too far from where you stood when the hallways changed scenery. Except there was nothing. No indication as to where the hallways began or ended, while your hands scrounged around the walls for any evidence for a point of entry.
Looks like a mechanized wall?
You inferred.
Ah!
Cried Midoriya from behind you. You turned to look around the hall, finding nothing out of the ordinary except for Midoriya hiding his face away under his hood. You turned to face him, attempting to find his face while you pulled the hood from his head, only to find his hands covering his eyes. You sighed at the sight, wondering what to do while you stared at this tall number one hero cower behind his palms.
Is it still there?
He asked timidly. You couldn't blame Midoriya for his reaction. He was first and foremost a bundle of nerves before he was headstrong. In fact, you never thought you would see him in this state, at least in a haunted manner, which wasn't really haunted.
Really?
You asked, earning a small nod from Midoriya. You smiled while you turned, ready to face whatever actor or animatronic stood by the halls.
What would the number one be afraid of?
You yelled, clutching into Midoriya's chest, causing him to immediately grab you in his embrace and hug you tightly into him. The spotlight lit a glittering display, his outfit sparkling in sequins while he stood with a rapier in hand. His skin glowed under the light, which after your scare, you soon realized it was some form of body paint.
Aoyama?
Asked Midoriya, spotting the blonde standing in the bright spotlight with a cheeky smile.
Oui. I couldn't help myself.
He purred with a smile, opening his arms out to lead the both of you down the corridor.
Please, pass through.
You sighed along with Midoriya, relieved that it wasn't a statue that actually animated itself to life. Cautiously walking past Aoyama, you continued on with Midoriya, your hands clutching tightly in his while he did the same. The sounds that echoed in the hall bounced around, wondering whether they were projected from a sound system or were created from whoever still lurked in the attraction. That all faded into the back of your mind when you caught a whiff of something in the air.
Do you smell smoke?
You asked, a little concerned.
Let's just get through the rest of this place,
suggested Midoriya, earning a rushed nod from you, wandering through the hallway until you reached the end. The house was eerily quiet, but not so much from the experience, eyeing the dark, broody hero that joined Shinsou and yourself in the attraction. Walking through the hallways became a bit boring, for lack of a better word, seeing nothing, if not nobody else but yourselves.
Dude, you scared the rest of the scarers away,
stated Shinsou with a little fluster in his tone.
It's a nice temple of darkness. I do appreciate your attempt to frighten me,
commented Tokoyami nonchalantly while he eyed the decor and the design of the hallway, covered in cobwebs and lit with striking purples and blues.
So it didn't work. No.
Shinsou sighed to himself with a small pout, trying his best to not show how much care he took to attempt scaring the jet black hero. You were with him every step of the way, planning ahead with Iida's mechanic and employing as many actors as possible to achieve the goal. It sounded like a fun idea, until you all stepped into the dimly lit corridor. You both didn't account for Dark Shadow's presence, even so small, freezing every actor from performing any potential jump scares in the halls.
At least you tried,
you reassured, hoping those words would soothe Shinsou's disappointment, but to no avail. He frowned through his face paint and his dark hood, earning a nervous chuckle from you.
I'm sure Fumi appreciated the effort,
spoke Tokoyami's partner beside him, their arms neatly wrapped around his own while he led them through the corridor.
I hardly hear anything except for whatever those noises are coming from above.
That's a loudspeaker, beloved,
informed Tokoyami, earning a small chuckle from his +1 to this attraction. You smiled at the both of them, finding how considerate Tokoyami was leading his +1 and ensuring they did not crash into anything through the corridor, just as much as they dressed simply for the occasion. Both Shinsou and yourself opted to pick up cloaks and decorate your faces with designs, if only to look ghoulish. If it met the condition, entry was allowed, which helped in managing this giant scare for Tokoyami, which failed.
It's actually pretty sweet,
you stated, catching Shinsou's ear.
What?
He asked.
Them. Sure, Tokoyami is a brooding guy, but he really did it to keep them safe. Can't fault him for that.
Shinsou sighed again, half in agreement, the other half in irritation, while his eyes trailed after the black and white cloaks from their entourage, disappearing into the dark ahead. You had never seen Shinsou utterly disappointed in himself, especially over a scare. However, with all the effort he put into working with Iida's mechanic, you understood the energy he expended to ensure the scares would be not only brutal, but also epic. There was a habit of Shinsou's that you learned over the years, of him wanting to make a huge statement in the smallest ways. With a smile, you wrapped your fingers around his, holding it close while you began to pull him into the corridor, walking past the cobwebs and the few bones scattered around.
Come on, let's enjoy the rest of the trip. Maybe there's an animatronic we didn't account for.
You suggested with an optimistic tone.
Always the way, kitten.
He cooed after, allowing you to lead him down the corridor after Tokoyami. Denki Kaminari stood by the door that Bakugou and his fiancée had already entered after their minor altercation with an unfortunate actor. He wondered how much Iida's mechanic was paying them, seeing that they had to contend with people like Bakugou today to begin with. Almost whispering a little prayer for them should they come face to face with the wolf in the dark. He fixed his collar and the horns that sat atop his head, aligning it as best as possible so that he wouldn't lose them through the manner. An oldie, but a classic. The devil outfit still stuck with him from UA. He just couldn't pass up how suave he felt in the look. He breathed a deep sigh, trying to wash the tension away while he swayed on his heels, scuffing the cheap knockoff Chelseas and eyeing the large front double doors. Has it been that long already? He wondered if he should just leave, even if he was able to open the front doors from the inside. It seemed redundant to even enjoy a horror experience without someone with him. The front doors opened with a creak, seizing his heart before he laid his eyes on you, dressed in your witch's costume and that large pointed hat that scraped against the door before you shut it behind you. He watched you on approach, careful on your boots while you swayed a little.
Everything okay?
He asked, watching you reach him with a light step.
Yeah, I just didn't feel well for a while.
You admitted, fixing the large hat atop your head.
I'm good to go now.
Are you sure?
He asked.
We could sit this one out.
No, don't. You looked so excited when we got the invite. Besides, I should get out more instead of being stuck in a room. You said so yourself.
Kaminari smiled at your optimism and enthusiasm, something that had to be rebuilt for a time. He was glad that there was a bit of reprieve, a calm and hopefully no storm in sight. He dug into his pockets and pulled out a ring, small and thin, but it glistened despite the dim lights that flickered in the foyer. He watched your smile brighten at the sight, giving your hand to him.
Thanks for holding on to it for me.
You softly spoke while he slipped it on your fingers, soon gently holding on to your hand.
Now, tell me if you feel any different any time during this,
advised Kaminari, linking your arm into his.
You'll know when I do.
You replied, taking in a deep breath before the both of you stepped through the threshold into the dark.